It all began on a calm afternoon when I was eagerly waiting for a delivery truck to arrive. I had been planning a renovation project for months, and the supplies were finally coming in. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual delivery to my house in the neighborhood. But as the truck turned the corner and slowly approached my driveway, I noticed something unusual. Standing right at the entrance was Karen, the HOA president, arms crossed and a stern look on her face. She wasn't just there by coincidence. She was there for the delivery. Before the truck could even pull up fully, Karen stepped forward and waved the driver down. "No trucks allowed," she said firmly. The driver blinked in confusion. "I have a delivery for this address," he said, gesturing toward my house. Karen didn't budge. "I'm sorry, but the HOA just passed a new rule banning trucks from entering the neighborhood." That moment felt surreal. Just days before, there was no such rule. I hadn't received any official notice. I asked Karen, "When did this happen? Why wasn't I informed?" She shrugged as if it was obvious. "The board decided it's to protect the roads and keep the neighborhood peaceful." I glanced down the street. The roads looked fine, and, in fact, I'd seen big construction trucks coming and going all week. This wasn't about roads or peace, it was about control. I tried to stay calm. "Karen, this delivery is for my home. Are you saying I can't get supplies for my own property?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she repeated, "No trucks. That's the rule." The driver was growing impatient. He called his dispatcher, then turned to me apologetically. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay here." I could feel my frustration boiling. This wasn't just about a truck. It was about someone trying to control what I could and couldn't do on my own property. I asked Karen, "Is this really about trucks? Or is this personal?" She just stared at me, silent. That was the moment I realized talking wouldn't work. Karen had drawn a line in the sand, and she wanted me to back down. The delivery left, and so did my hopes for starting renovations on schedule. Over the next few days, I kept hearing whispers around the neighborhood. Karen had been enforcing the ban strictly. Some neighbors complained about delayed deliveries. Others whispered about Karen's sudden obsession with rules and order. I reached out to a few friends who had experience with HOAs and local laws. They confirmed what I suspected. Karen's truck ban wasn't backed by any clear legal authority. It was a power move, plain and simple. The idea that someone could block supplies to their own home was absurd. But it was happening here, right now. Late one night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my empty driveway and a stack of unopened renovation plans. I felt stuck, frustrated, but determined. If Karen wanted to play hardball, I was ready to respond. The question was how. After that first frustrating encounter with Karen, I spent the next few days consumed by one thought: how to get my deliveries without bending to her unreasonable rules. The renovation couldn't wait, and neither could I. I started digging into the HOA's governing documents, trying to find any mention of a truck ban. To my surprise and relief, there was nothing. No clause about prohibiting deliveries, no emergency powers given to Karen to stop trucks, and no community vote recorded. The rule she was enforcing was, at best, a whispered suggestion, and at worst, an abuse of power. But I also knew fighting Karen through official channels would be a slow, exhausting process. HOA board meetings were scheduled once a month, and she had a tight grip on the rest of the board members. Plus, the neighborhood was split. Some people loved her strict no trucks stance, thinking it kept things neat. So, I needed a workaround, something bold, that would force Karen and the HOA to rethink their stance. That's when the idea hit me. If trucks weren't allowed on the roads, why not bypass the roads entirely? What if I brought my supplies from above? The next morning, I called a local helicopter service. It sounded crazy, even to me. A helicopter delivery for home renovation supplies. It wasn't exactly common in my neighborhood, but when I explained the situation, the pilot laughed and said, "You'd be surprised what people ask for these days. Let's make it happen." I booked a test flight for the following week. The plan was simple: load the supplies onto the helicopter and drop them directly into my backyard. No roads, no trucks, no Karen. Meanwhile, I prepared the community for the surprise. I didn't want to tip off Karen completely, but I dropped a few hints to neighbors who had been quietly supporting me. The anticipation built quietly, like the calm before a storm. On the day of the flight, I woke early, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. I watched from my front porch as the helicopter approached. The sound of rotors filled the air, a deep, powerful hum that made heads turn and windows open across the street. Karen was already at the entrance, fuming. She stomped her feet and yelled something about illegal deliveries and breaking HOA rules. But her voice was drowned out by the chopper's roar. The helicopter hovered above my backyard, and with precision, the pilot lowered a crate. By harness, it was the first shipment, essential tools and materials for the renovation. Neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering, some filming on their phones. I caught a few smiles and nods of approval. This was bigger than just a delivery. It was a statement. Karen marched over, red-faced and shouting, but there was nothing she could do. The delivery was legal. The helicopter landed briefly to unload, and then took off, leaving a cloud of dust and a stunned HOA president behind. That night, I posted a video of the aerial delivery online. It quickly gained attention, not just in our neighborhood but across nearby communities. People admired the creativity and boldness. One person even called it the ultimate HOA clapback. The next few days brought even more deliveries, all flown in by helicopter. Furniture, lumber, even plants for the garden. Karen's protests grew louder, but the community's support for the airlift deliveries only increased. I knew this was only the beginning. The morning the helicopter returned felt almost surreal. Word had spread like wildfire, and a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalks. Their faces a mix of curiosity and amusement. Even a few neighbors who usually stayed quiet came out, whispering excitedly. Karen, predictably, was waiting near the entrance. Her usual cold composure was cracked by frustration. Her eyes darted nervously toward the sky every few seconds as the helicopter approached. I could almost see her trying to figure out how to stop what was happening. The rotor's deep thrum grew louder, announcing the arrival of the next delivery. The pilot skillfully maneuvered the chopper over my backyard, and the crew lowered the supplies with practiced precision. Crates containing heavy tools, lumber, and even bulky furniture descended slowly. Neighbors pulled out their phones, some live streaming the scene. Comments flooded in. HOA Karen versus the airlift? This is next level rebellion. I want a helicopter for my deliveries. Karen stormed toward my property, her face flushed with anger. You can't do this. It's against the rules, she shouted, but there was no rule about helicopters. A few neighbors stepped forward, shaking their heads at Karen's outburst. One older gentleman said quietly, "She's out of control." Another whispered, "About time someone stood up to her." Karen's frustration was visible. She made a call to the HOA board, demanding an emergency meeting to address the helicopter invasion. But by then, the damage was done. The deliveries continued for several days. Each time, the helicopter's arrival became an event. Kids ran outside to watch, adults stopped to chat, and the story spread beyond the neighborhood. Even the local news picked up the story, interviewing me and a few residents. They were fascinated by the bold defiance of the truck ban. "It's great. Like a small war zone," one reporter joked. Meanwhile, Karen's attempts to stop the deliveries grew more desperate. She put up signs warning residents about unauthorized deliveries and threatened fines. But without any actual rules covering helicopters, her warnings carried little weight. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some neighbors still supported Karen, believing she was protecting the community's peace. But many others were quietly thrilled at the spectacle. One afternoon, as I watched a shipment of garden supplies lowered by cable, Karen approached me, again, this time more cautiously. "You're pushing this too far," she warned. "This could get dangerous." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm just getting what I'm entitled to. You can't stop me with made-up rules." Her eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself." That moment was electric. It was clear the battle wasn't just about trucks or helicopters anymore. It was about power, control, and who really called the shots. The neighborhood was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Karen wasn't one to back down. After the spectacle of the helicopter deliveries, she dug in her heels and launched a full-scale campaign to regain control. I could tell she was rattled, but pride kept her pushing harder. Within days, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. The agenda, banning aerial deliveries and reinforcing the truck ban. Flyers were distributed, emails were sent, and residents were urged to attend. The atmosphere in the community shifted from curious excitement to tense confrontation. I showed up early, along with several neighbors who had quietly supported the airlift idea. Others arrived with mixed feelings, some siding with Karen, hoping for order and peace. Others skeptical of her motives but unsure where to stand. The meeting started with Karen speaking passionately about protecting our neighborhood and preserving safety. She painted the helicopter deliveries as reckless stunts that threatened the quiet lifestyle everyone valued. But as she spoke, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many residents weren't convinced. The idea of banning helicopters when only a handful of people even had access to them seemed unreasonable, almost absurd. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts calmly. There's no clear rule banning deliveries like these. The HOA's job is to serve the community, not control it unfairly. We all want peace, but not at the cost of basic rights. Some residents nodded, others whispered agreement. I could feel the tension shift. Karen's frustration grew. She interrupted, accusing me of trying to undermine the board and ignoring the rules. But her words sounded hollow. A few voices from the crowd challenged her. An older couple shared how Karen's tactics had delayed essential repairs and supplies to their own homes. A young family spoke about feeling trapped by the restrictions. The meeting grew heated, emotions rising as neighbors debated what the HOA's real role should be. Was it to protect property values and community peace, or to wield unchecked power over residents' lives? Karen called for a vote to pass new rules banning helicopter deliveries outright. The result was surprisingly close. Some supported her, but a significant portion opposed the measure. The board was left without a clear mandate. Karen's attempts to clamp down were losing steam. After the meeting, I walked home feeling a mix of relief and caution. The battle wasn't over, but the community was starting to see through Karen's tactics. In the days that followed, Karen sent out more threatening notices, warning residents of fines and penalties if they accepted helicopter deliveries. But without support from the board or community, those threats were empty. Meanwhile, the helicopter deliveries continued. Supplies arrived smoothly, and neighbors began to appreciate the creativity and resilience behind the effort. I noticed more quiet smiles and nods during conversations. Even some of Karen's staunchest supporters seemed to be reconsidering their stance. The neighborhood was changing not just physically with the renovations underway but socially, too. The old power dynamics were shifting, and no one could say what would happen next. As the weeks went by, something surprising happened. What started as a personal fight against Karen's truck ban slowly turned into a community movement. The airlift deliveries became a symbol not just of defiance, but of residents reclaiming their voice. At first, most neighbors had stayed quiet or distant, but the spectacle of the helicopters, the heated meetings, and the growing frustrations brought them out of their shells. Slowly, I noticed familiar faces joining conversations, offering support or sharing their own experiences with Karen's overreach. One afternoon, I ran into Mr. Thompson, a longtime resident who rarely got involved in neighborhood politics. He told me quietly, "I never thought I'd say this, but you're right, Karen's gone too far. We deserve better." That same week, a group of contractors who had been working quietly on other homes approached me. They said Karen's ban was hurting their business and worse, unfairly targeting certain residents. To show their support, they offered discounted helicopter delivery services for anyone willing to bypass the truck ban. It felt like a small revolution was taking shape. Meanwhile, Karen's grip seemed to weaken. The more she pushed, the more resistance grew. Her emergency meetings became battlegrounds where neighbors voiced frustrations openly, no longer intimidated by her stern presence. One particularly memorable evening, a community-wide meeting turned tense. Karen attempted to cut it short, frustrated by the growing dissent, but an influential resident, who owned a local media company, stepped up. Without hesitation, he started live streaming the meeting on social media. Suddenly, the whole town and beyond could watch the unfolding drama. Comments poured in from viewers far and wide, many rooting for the residents standing up to the HOA president. That live stream changed everything. It exposed the deep divides in the neighborhood and put pressure on Karen like never before. The next day, local news crews arrived, eager to cover the story of a small community's fight against an overbearing HOA. Interviews, footage of helicopter deliveries and resident stories were broadcast to thousands. Karen's public image took a hit. What was once a quiet neighborhood dispute had become a public spectacle. Support for the airlift deliveries grew louder, and the calls for a fair, more transparent HOA intensified. But even with the tide turning, Karen wasn't ready to concede. She doubled down, sending letters threatening fines and legal action for unauthorized deliveries and violations of community rules. The community, however, was no longer afraid. Neighbors formed groups to pool resources, share information, and prepare for any legal battles. In the midst of all this, I kept the helicopter deliveries coming. Each arrival a small victory celebrated by those who had grown weary of Karen's control. The battle lines were clear now, Karen versus a united neighborhood. But beneath the surface, something unexpected was happening. The fight wasn't just about trucks or helicopters anymore. It was about the heart of the community itself. Karen's next move came with a chilling letter and official-looking notice claiming that I was violating multiple HOA regulations and risking hefty fines, even legal action. She accused me of reckless endangerment by using helicopters in a residential area and insisted I cease immediately or face consequences. At first, the letter felt like a punch to the gut. The language was aggressive, designed to intimidate and silence. But I wasn't about to back down, not after everything. I consulted a lawyer recommended by a neighbor who had experience with HOA disputes. The attorney reviewed the notice and laughed. "They don't have much ground here," he said. "No clear rules against helicopters, and your rights to access your property are strong." That was a relief. But it also meant the battle was shifting to the legal arena, and that could drag on for months or even years. Still, I decided to push back publicly. I shared the letter and my lawyer's response with the community. The message was clear. We wouldn't be bullied by vague rules and threats to make a statement. I organized a Sky Supply Day where residents were invited to witness another helicopter delivery. It was part protest, part celebration, a show of solidarity. That day, dozens gathered to watch the helicopter hover over my backyard, lowering crates filled with essentials. The air buzzed with energy, laughter, cheers, and the unmistakable sense that something bigger than a property dispute was unfolding. Karen was there too, looking furious but unable to stop the event. Cameras from local news stations recorded everything, but just as it seemed the community had won a round, an unexpected twist came. One afternoon, I received a call from a neighbor who had been quietly observing the whole situation from the sidelines. She told me she had evidence, emails, and documents showing that Karen had secretly approved a few special truck deliveries for her own family while enforcing the ban on everyone else. It was a game changer. this proof of hypocrisy blew the lid off Karen's claims of fairness and protecting the neighborhood. If the president was breaking her own rules, the community would have little reason to respect her authority. I shared the evidence anonymously with the HOA board and a few trusted residents. The reaction was immediate. Some board members expressed shock and anger. Others avoided the topic altogether. The pressure on Karen intensified. Rumors began to swirl about possible resignations and investigations. For the first time, the balance of power seemed to shift decisively, yet Karen wasn't finished. She hinted at retaliation, warning that some battles are better left alone, and that she had resources a community DIDN, single quotes T. The tension was palpable. The fight had become more than just a neighborhood dispute. It was personal, political, and unpredictable. And while I prepared for whatever came next, one thing was clear. The airlift wasn't just about deliveries anymore. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The evidence of Karen's secret truck deliveries spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. It shattered the last illusion of fairness she had tried to maintain. The community, once divided and hesitant, now rallied with a new energy. Fueled by a sense of justice and a desire to reclaim control, I noticed a shift in the way neighbors spoke to me. No longer cautious, but openly supportive. Text messages poured in. Offers of help and encouragement arrived from all corners of the community. The HOA board was under pressure. A special meeting was called with one clear item on the agenda: Karen's future as president. On the day of the meeting, the community center was packed. Residents who rarely attended HOA gatherings filled every seat, standing room only. Cameras from local media returned, eager to cover the unfolding drama. Karen arrived late, her usual confident stride, replaced by a nervous hesitation. Her supporters clustered nearby, but it was clear she was on the defensive. The meeting began with a formal reading of the evidence against her. Emails, delivery records, and testimonies were presented with undeniable clarity. The room buzzed. With murmurs of disbelief and anger, Karen tried to defend herself, claiming misunderstandings and exceptions. But her words rang hollow. Then came the moment that changed everything. A respected elder of the community, who had stayed silent throughout much of the conflict, stood and spoke. With a calm but firm voice, he condemned the hypocrisy and called for a vote of no confidence. The tension in the room was thick. When the vote was taken, the result was overwhelming. Karen was removed from her position as HOA president. Cheers erupted, applause filled the room, and for the first time in months, the community felt a collective sense of victory. But the story didn't end there. In the days following Karen's ousting, the neighborhood came together to draft new guidelines, ones that respected residents' rights and encouraged transparency. The helicopter deliveries were officially permitted, and the truck ban was revised to be fair and reasonable. I continued to receive messages from neighbors thanking me for standing up. Some even joked about starting their own airlift traditions. Still, the victory was bittersweet. Karen had left behind scars, divisions in the community, and lingering tensions that would take time to heal. One evening, as I stood on my porch, watching the sunset, a familiar sound filled the air, the distant thrum of a helicopter. It was a reminder of how far the neighborhood had come, and how sometimes change requires bold, unexpected actions. The war over deliveries was over, but the fight for community and respect was just beginning. With Karen gone and the HOA board restructured, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The dark cloud of tension slowly lifted, replaced by cautious optimism and the promise of fairer days ahead. The new board members were different, more open, approachable, and eager to listen. They invited residents to participate in decisions and held regular meetings where concerns could be voiced without fear of retaliation. The truck ban was softened, focusing on reasonable limits rather than outright prohibitions. And most importantly, the helicopter deliveries were welcomed as a legitimate option for residents who needed them. For me, the success felt deeply personal. What began as a fight to get supplies had turned into a movement about respect, fairness, and community empowerment. Neighbors started organizing block parties, potlucks, and cleanup days. The division that Karen's reign had sown was slowly healing. People who had been hesitant to speak out now shared stories, ideas, and hopes for the future. But just when it seemed the story was truly over, a surprising twist emerged. One afternoon, while checking the mailbox, I found a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a note in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for showing us the power of standing up. Sometimes change takes courage, and you have plenty of it. This neighborhood is better because of you." Along with the note was a small key, ornate and mysterious. Curious, I asked around, but no one claimed to have sent it. That night, I inspected the key closely and noticed a tiny engraving, the address of the community's original clubhouse, an old building long locked and unused. The next day, I gathered a few trusted neighbors, and we decided to see what the key opened. To our surprise, it fit perfectly into the clubhouse's front door lock. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty but charming space filled with faded photographs, forgotten records, and memorabilia from the neighborhood's early days. It was like stepping back in time, a reminder of the community's roots and shared History. The discovery sparked a new project, restoring the clubhouse as a hub for residents, a place to gather, celebrate, and plan the neighborhood's future together. That old key symbolized more than just access to a building. It represented opening doors to new possibilities, trust, and unity. Looking back, the helicopter deliveries had been just the beginning, the spark that ignited a flame of change, and as the sun set over the neighborhood, I realized that sometimes, the most unexpected battles lead to the strongest communities.